Olives. You're hungry already, but before you can even think about food, a neighbor waves you over with a knowing grin. He's heard rumors, always rumors, that the city might hand out extra grain this week. The empire runs on free bread as much as it does on soldiers. Imagine thousands of people like you, clutching their baskets, desperate to claim their ration before supplies run dry. The idea of free food sounds good, but the reality is long lines, elbows to the ribs, and the possibility of going home empty-handed. You tuck that into your mental schedule right after "try not to get trampled." You wander down the cobblestones, careful not to trip on the deep grooves carved by cartwheels over centuries. These streets weren't designed for strolling. They're urban obstacle courses. Every few steps you hop over puddles that are definitely not rainwater. The Romans had a sewer system, the Cloaca Maxima, which sounds impressive until you realize it still dumped much of the city's waste into the Tiber. And yes, that same Tiber might provide your drinking water if you're unlucky. Thirsty yet? At the corner, you meet the sunrise in full. The reddish light paints the temples and columns, making them look like movie props. The Forum glitters in the distance, but where you stand, life feels less like marble and more like mud. The divide between the fancy patricians and you, the plebeian sleepwalker, is wider than the Circus Maximus itself. You'll see senators in white togas later, their hems spotless thanks to slaves who scrubbed them with chalk. Your tunic, by comparison, has a suspicious patch that might be yesterday's lentil soup. Somewhere nearby you hear the military trumpet call, sharp and urgent, echoing through narrow alleys. Soldiers are assembling for drill, boots pounding in rhythm. It's a sound that could inspire pride if it didn't also make you worry that someone will robe you into service. The Roman army isn't optional if the recruiters get desperate. And you look like fresh meat. You duck back into the shadows, pretending to inspect a cracked wall. The truth is, the city is already demanding things from you. Work, taxes, loyalty, survival strategies. You haven't even had breakfast yet, and your mental to-do list already feels like you're trying to juggle amphorae. But you keep walking, because the only way through a Roman day is forward. For a fleeting moment, though, you catch a softer detail. A small shrine tucked into a corner, smoke curling up from a single candle. Someone has left figs as an offering, their skin glistening in the rising sun. Rome is never entirely ugly. It hides beauty in the cracks, like a flower pushing through stone. You almost smile, almost forget the sewage underfoot. Almost. And then a rooster crows, loud, insistent, and way too close. You realize it belongs to the neighbor across the alley who insists on keeping livestock in the city. The bird flaps its wings, showers feathers, and nearly collides with your face. Welcome to Roman animal control. There isn't any. You mutter under your breath and shuffle on, clutching your tunic tighter as the city wakes at full throttle. Your day has barely begun, yet you feel the weight of history pressing down on your shoulders, heavy as the stones under your sandals. The sounds, the smells, the people, they're not background noise. They're the reality of a city where survival is measured in patience, resilience, and how fast you can dodge chamber pots. And as the sun climbs higher, you're beginning to realize you really wouldn't last long here. You shuffle farther down the uneven stone street, and the city's morning energy comes crashing into you like a cymbal. Forget alarm clocks. Rome's soundtrack is its own orchestra, and it plays every instrument at once. The grinding of cartwheels on basalt blocks, the clopping of donkey hooves, the constant shouting of vendors trying to outscream each other. It's enough to make you wish for noise-cancelling headphones, but the closest thing here is sticking your fingers in your ears and hoping nobody notices. The smells arrive next, and they do not politely knock. They slam through your nostrils and settle deep in your memory. To your left, you catch the tang of freshly baked bread rising from a bakery's clay oven, and you think, oh, maybe this isn't so bad. But then the wind shifts, and suddenly it's fish. strong, briny, and very much not fresh. Someone dumps a bucket of spoiled entrails into the gutter, and now the bread aroma has been thoroughly defeated. You wrinkle your nose, which only makes the stench stronger. Congratulations, you've discovered the ancient Roman version of air pollution. Smells stacked on smells until your senses give up. A man in a tunic waves a stick of roasted meat toward you. It looks edible, but you have questions. What animal was this? Why is it grey on the inside but charred outside? And why does the stick smell faintly of goat hair? Still, the vendor yells about his prices, proudly announcing that his skewers are cheaper than the next guy's. You consider it for a second, but decide survival means not gambling your stomach before noon. As you walk, you realize how alive these alleys are. Chickens peck around your ankles, dogs bark from rooftops, and a child scampers barefoot carrying a clay jug almost as big as he is. He slips on a puddle, curses in Latin that you thankfully don't fully understand, and dashes away again. Historians still, than stylish. Noise doesn't only come from work. A man perched on a crate begins shouting about the latest political scandal. He waves his arms wildly, declaring that some senator skimmed money from the grain supply. A few passers-by stop to argue, others heckle, and within moments you're caught in a small crowd buzzing with outrage. It's part street theatre, part news broadcast, part dangerous gossip. The Romans loved debate almost as much as they loved bread and circuses. You edge away carefully. The last thing you need is to get swept into a mob before breakfast. Your stomach growls anyway, a protest louder than any vendor. You catch sight of a stall offering simple barley cakes, dry and crumbly but edible. The seller insists they're fresh, though judging by the cracks, they might have been fresh yesterday too. You chew on cautiously, the flavour a mix of dust and faint sweetness. It fills the gap but doesn't bring joy. Still, you remind yourself this is fuel, and you'll need it. Coffee hasn't been invented yet. Imagine facing all this chaos uncaffeinated. Yes, survival odds just dipped again. As you munch, a troupe of musicians marches past, flutes, rattles, and a drum that sounds like thunder. They aren't professionals, just street performers hoping for coins. The rhythm pulses through the alley, clashing with the hammering leatherworker, the shouting vendors, and the squealing pigs. It's less symphony, more headache, but you can't deny it's lively. Rome is like one big open-air festival, only without the hygiene, organisation, or ticket refunds. Now the smells tilt once more. A cart rolls by with open amphorae of garum, that infamous fermented fish sauce Romans loved. To you, it smells like death trapped in a jar. To them, it's ketchup, soy sauce and barbecue combined. You gag slightly, earning a side-eye from the vendor who probably thinks you're a barber. Rianne for not appreciating fine condiments. Joke's on you, sir. Modern noses have their limits. Somewhere above, a balcony creaks and a tenant dumps a bucket of grey water into the street. You leap aside just in time, but the splash still dots your tunic. Congratulations, you've now been officially baptized in Roman filth. If you were hoping for a gentle stroll to wake up, this city laughs in your face. Every corner is a new sensory attack. And yet, woven into the chaos, there's something magnetic. The sun reflects off marble temples rising in the distance, giving the illusion of order and grandeur. Voices overlap in 100 dialects, Latin, Greek, whispers from travellers all over the empire. The sheer energy buzzes under your skin, a reminder that Rome is not just any city. It's the beating heart of a world, messy and magnificent. You're dizzy, overstimulated and already exhausted, but deep down you know this noise, this smell, this very chaos is what makes Rome alive. You drag in a deep breath, instantly regret it because yes, garum again, but you keep moving. There's no way to pause in this current. The street pushes you forward and survival means flow flowing with it. Every step is a gamble between fascination and disgust, but that's the Roman recipe. And as the sun climbs higher, casting sharper shadows on stone walls, you realize one thing with clarity. Sleep may be boring history's gift, but Rome itself will never let you rest. Your belly still rumbles as you wander deeper into the street maze. The Romans don't really believe in the kind of breakfasts you're used to. No eggs sizzling in a pan, no stack of pancakes, not even a decent cup of tea. Breakfast here is called ientaculum, and for most people it's barely worthy of the name. You're handed a small hunk of stale bread that you soften in watered-down wine. That's it. No jam, no butter, no fancy spread, just a chewy reminder that the day ahead will require more energy than you currently have. The bread crunches between your teeth, sharp crumbs scratching your gums, and you wonder if dentists existed here. Technically, yes, there were tooth pullers who would happily yank a molar out on the street. Anesthesia, forget it. You'd get a strong grip, a prayer to Apollo, and maybe a swig of wine if the puller was generous. Historians still argue whether most Romans actually brushed their teeth with powdered charcoal or just hoped for the best. Either way, you're clenching your jaw a little tighter now. As you chew, a neighbour offers a small bowl of olives, wrinkled and salty, preserved in brine. They're tangy, bitter, and honestly not the worst thing you've eaten. But you can't shake the thought that this might be your entire morning meal. A fleeting sense of injustice flares inside you. How is it that emperors dine on roasted peacock tongues while you're gnawing on bread fit for pigeons? You glance skyward, half expecting Jupiter himself to shrug and say, "That's Rome, kid." The real injustice, though, is the absence of coffee. You don't realize how much modern life depends on that one caffeinated lifeline until you're yawning on a Roman street with zero options. Instead, you sip diluted wine, which makes you woozy rather than alert. Imagine starting your workday slightly tipsy. It's not exactly a productivity hack. You joke to yourself that maybe this explains half of Roman politics. To distract your growling stomach, you let your senses wander. Somewhere nearby, a vendor sells figs, their skins splitting with syrupy sweetness. You're tempted, but then you remember figs are often left as offerings to household gods. Snatching one feels like tempting fate. You back away, mumbling an apology to the tiny shrine that probably isn't listening. The gods are everywhere here. Small statues, painted frescoes, little corners of devotion squeezed between market stalls. You tread carefully, knowing Romans take omens seriously. Accidentally eating a sacred fig could land you with more than indigestion. Meanwhile, your fellow citizens aren't exactly enjoying luxury either. Most plebeians eat roughly the same thing: bread, olives, maybe some cheese if the goats have been cooperative. Meat is rare for common folks, reserved for festivals or those with coin to spare. And the grain supply? It's a political football. Emperors keep people happy with the grain dole, but miss a shipment and riots erupt. You glance at the long lines already forming for today's handouts, men and women clutching baskets, their faces tense with hunger. You quietly add, "Don't starve," to your ever-growing Roman to-do list. In the distance, a rooster crows again, defiantly reminding you that livestock roams freely in this city. You notice a boy casually carrying a duck under his arm as though it's just another accessory. Quirky fact: Romans sometimes fattened geese and ducks on purpose, inventing a primitive version of foie gras. Not exactly cruelty-free dining. You pat your stomach and remind yourself not to get attached to any animal you meet here. It's probably someone's dinner waiting to happen. A little further along, you spot a tavern already serving warm chickpea stew. The smell is earthy, nutty, actually pleasant compared to the fish sauce nightmare you endured earlier. You peer in, only to find it packed with men drinking wine before the sun is fully up. They raise cups, cheer boisterously, and one man nearly falls off his stool laughing. You hesitate at the door, join them and risk starting your day sloshed, or skip it and keep trudging sober but cranky. Neither option screams success. You settle on buying a handful of dried dates from a vendor. Sweet, sticky, chewy, they glue your molars together in a way that almost feels comforting. For a brief moment the chaos fades and you savor the burst of flavor. But the dates come with a side of reality. They're expensive imports from far-off provinces. You've just eaten a luxury item, and you wonder if that means you'll need to skip dinner later. Rome always makes you pay, one way or another. As you chew, you hear two older men arguing about whether imported spices are worth the cost. One insists pepper from India is a gift of the gods. The other claims it's a waste better suited for the wealthy. Historians still argue whether ordinary Romans really used spices often, or if it was strictly an upper-class indulgence. You chuckle softly, realizing some debates never change. Then sneeze when a gust of spice dust floats up your nose. So much for dignity. By now, the sun has climbed higher, and your body is beginning to feel the pressure of the coming day. Breakfast, such as it was, doesn't really fuel you. Instead, it leaves you wanting more food, more energy, more comfort. But in Rome, survival isn't about satisfaction. It's about scraping by, one crust of bread at a time. Your feet ache already, the cobblestones merciless against thin soles. You sigh, thinking of modern sneakers, cushioning, even socks. Here, your only option is to keep shuffling forward, toes stubbed and sandals worn. You glance at the looming shadows cast by temples and wonder what's next. Rumour has it the baths will open soon, and though it's still morning, people will flock there not just to scrub off grime, but to gossip, deal and socialise. You decide maybe that's where you should head to. Who knows, maybe a dip in warm water will revive you after this bread and wine breakfast. Or maybe you'll just end up wedged between sweaty strangers while someone yells about politics. Either way, your day in Rome marches forward and you have no choice but to keep marching with it. You push through the crowded lanes until the looming facade of the public baths appears, columns rising high and steam curling lazily from the roof vents. The thermae are not a luxury for the wealthy only, they are the social heart of Roman life. Everyone comes here sooner or later because cleanliness, conversation and sometimes outright scheming all mix together in the same warm water. You step inside and the humid air hits you like a wall, thick with the mingled scents of sweat, oil and damp stone. First, you're directed to the apoditerium, the changing room. Here, benches line the walls and niches hold piles of clothes. Attendants hover nearby, watching like hawks because theft is rampant. You glance around nervously at strangers stripping down, wondering if your one ragged tunic will still be there when you return. Romans weren't shy about nudity in these spaces, and you feel oddly out of place, like you've walked into the wrong locker room at a gym where everyone forgot deodorant. A burly man slaps oil across his chest and arms, then hands his flask to a slave who will scrape it all off with a curved bronze tool called a strigil. That's the Roman idea of bathing, oil up, sweat in the heat, scrape the filth away, and then soak. Soap isn't really part of the process. You shudder slightly, thinking about all the layers of grime being passed around in here. Historians still argue whether this method was more hygienic than not bathing at all. You lean toward the not really side. Still, the baths aren't just about getting clean. They're where gossip flows thicker than garum sauce. You overhear two men loudly debating whether the emperor's new statue looks heroic or ridiculous. Another man whispers about a senator caught taking bribes. A group of young men laugh about gladiators betting on which one will survive the next games. The chatter bounces off the tile, the walls, and you realize this place doubles as Rome's version of social media. Rumours spread fast, half-truths trend quicker than facts, and nobody ever logs off. You step into the tepidarium, the warm room, and the air wraps around you like a damp blanket. Your skin prickles as the heat seeps into your bones. Then comes the caldarium, a hot chamber filled with steam so thick you can barely see. Sweat pours down your face, and you wonder if this is relaxation or punishment. A man beside you grins and mutters that sweating cures everything from headaches to heartbreak. You doubt it, but your pores don't care. They're wide open and leaking like leaky amphorae. After a while, you move to the frigidarium, the cold plunge pool. You dip one toe, yelp, and instantly regret it. The water is icy, shocking your system like a slap. Romans insist it invigorates the body, strengthens the spirit, and prepares you for the day. You, meanwhile, are certain it just froze your soul solid. You dunk anyway, shivering as laughter echoes around you. At least everyone else looks equally miserable, which is mildly comforting. You emerge from the plunge dripping and shaky, but strangely awake. Your muscles feel looser, your skin tingles, and your head clears. For a brief second, you think maybe this was worth it. Then you remember your tunic waiting in the apoditerium and rush back to check if it's still there. Miraculously, it hasn't vanished. You slip into the damp cloth, reminding yourself once again that Romans have no concept of personal dryers. As you fasten your belt, an older man approaches and casually strikes up conversation. He asks if you've heard about the new taxes being debated in the Senate. Before you can respond, he launches into a monologue about corrupt governors, greedy merchants, and how the empire isn't what it used to be. You nod politely, realizing you've stumbled out. And to one of those conversations you can't escape. Rome is as much about listening as it is about talking, and sometimes both are equally exhausting. Nearby, a man sells cheap snacks, nuts, fruit, and little rolls stuffed with herbs. The smell tempts you, but your coin purse is painfully light. You watch as others munch happily, crumbs falling into their oiled beards while you quietly lick your lips. The irony stings. You just spent an hour pretending to be wealthy enough to relax, and now you can't even afford a fig. Welcome to the Roman class divide, conveniently on display in a single bathhouse. Still, you pick up a few quirky tidbits while lingering. Someone mentions that certain wealthy Romans believed bathing too often weakened the body, while others thought skipping baths entirely was barbaric. One rumour even suggests that emperors sometimes mixed perfumes into the water to impress guests. Historians still argue whether those stories are exaggerations or genuine indulgences. Either way, you don't smell perfume right now, only the sour tang of human stew. When you finally step outside, blinking in the bright sunlight, the city feels louder than before, but you carry with you the faint relief of having survived your first Roman bath. Your skin is red, your tunic is damp, and your head is filled with more gossip than you ever wanted. Yet somehow you feel almost Roman. Until, of course, you remember that the rest of the day still stretches endlessly ahead. The streets greet you again with clattering carts and shouting vendors. You take one last deep breath, instantly regret inhaling the fish smell again, and set your eyes toward the forum. Maybe, just maybe, you'll survive until lunch. The heat of the morning swells as you weave your way toward the workshops and stalls where ordinary Romans grind out their daily survival. You're not here to sightsee marble temples or admire statues. You're here to face the grind, the relentless wheel of labour that keeps the empire moving. And today you've got a patron to appease. In Rome, work isn't just about skill or ambition. It's about who you serve and how convincingly you flatter them. Your patron is a man of modest status, wealthy enough to command loyalty, but not so powerful that he'll remember your name tomorrow. You shuffle up to his domus, careful to keep your tunic straight. The porter eyes you with suspicion, as if you've already done something wrong just by breathing too loud. Inside, You wait your turn among other clients, each one eager to bow, scrape, and mutter respectful words. This is patronage, the backbone of Roman social life. You offer loyalty and service, and in return, you might receive a few coins, or maybe just the vague promise of protection. When your patron finally appears, his toga swishes across the marble floor like a wave of white fabric. He greets you with a nod so small it might be accidental. You deliver your carefully rehearsed compliments, sprinkling in phrases about his wisdom and generosity. He listens with half an ear while dictating instructions to a scribe. The entire ritual feels hollow, but here, survival means playing the part. Historians still argue whether the system kept society stable or simply made everyone resentful. You're leaning toward the second option. Your reward today is a coin, barely enough to buy lunch, and the unspoken expectation that you'll show up again tomorrow. You pocket it with a stiff smile, thinking how modern jobs at least come with something resembling wages. Here, you're a professional flatterer and business is booming. Leaving the domus. Or do you notice the street outside lined with workshops buzzing with activity? Smiths hammer iron into tools and weapons, sparks flashing against dark walls. The clang echoes so loudly you feel it in your teeth. One smith mutters curses as he pulls a glowing blade from the coals, sweat pouring down his arms. You edge past quickly, worried a stray spark might brand your skin for life. Further down, you pass a pottery shop where apprentices spin clay on wheels, hands flying as jars take shape. The air is thick with dust and you cough, earning a glare from the potter who clearly doesn't want tourists or freeloaders loitering. Every shop in Rome feels like a furnace, labouring non-stop to keep the city fed, clothed, armed and entertained. For the workers, there's no 9-to-5 clock to punch out from. The sun is the only timekeeper and it demands long hours. A quirky detail catches your eye. In one corner, a man stirs a vat of garum, that infamous fermented fish sauce. The smell is enough to make your stomach lurch. He beams proudly, telling anyone who'll listen that his sauce is the best in the district, aged just long enough for the perfect punch. You politely nod while holding your breath, wondering how anyone willingly eats this without gagging. Rumour has it some factories exported garum across the empire, making fortunes off stinky jars. Historians still argue whether everyone loved it or whether it was more of an acquired taste forced by necessity. Either way, your nose begs for mercy. You're jostled suddenly by a man carrying a load of amphorae. He barks at you to move faster. He has deadlines too. You stumble aside, muttering an apology, and watch him vanish into the swarm. Rome's workers are everywhere. Builders laying bricks, slaves hauling stone, scribes scratching wax tablets with styluses. Everyone moves with a frantic urgency because the city is a beast that must always be fed. You find yourself imagining what job might suit you here. Smithing? Too hot? Pottery? Too dusty? Garum making? Absolutely not. Maybe scribing, at least you'd sit down. But then you recall that scribes often work long nights, eyes straining under dim lamplight, copying endless contracts and legal documents. Their backs ache, their wax tablets smudge, and their pay is laughable. You sigh. There is no cushy job in Rome, at least not for you. As noon approaches, you feel the weight of exhaustion already pressing down. The heat radiates off the cobblestones, sweat glues your tunic to your skin, and your coin purse jingles pathetically with one tiny clink. This, you realize, is the true Roman grind. Endless labor, endless noise, endless compromise, all to scrape by one more day. Still, even amid the fatigue, there's something oddly mesmerizing about it. The rhythm of hammers, the chatter of merchants, the buzz of constant motion. It's chaotic, yes, but also alive. You think briefly of modern office jobs, cubicles and email chains, and almost laugh. Different millennium, same exhaustion. You wipe your brow and glance toward the forum in the distance, where the real noise, political noise, awaits. You're not sure which is worse, a boss who ignores you or a senator who screams at you. Either way, you'll find out soon enough. By the time you push your way into the forum, the sun is climbing high, pouring golden light over marble columns and carved statues that seem to glow in the heat. From a distance, it all looks majestic, a postcard-worthy symbol of power. Up close, though, it's chaos incarnate. Imagine the busiest train station you've ever been in, then triple the noise and replace the commuters with toga-wearing politicians, farmers waving petitions, beggars reaching out with empty hands, and lawyers shouting themselves hoarse. Welcome to the Roman Forum, part courthouse, part marketplace, part gossip column, and part mosh pit. The first thing that hits you is the sheer volume. Voices collide like crashing cymbals. Orators stand on platforms, delivering speeches at full blast, competing with each other for attention. One man waves his arms so wildly you're sure he's about to take flight, while another stabs the air with his stylus like he's dueling an invisible enemy. Their Latin thunders across the square, and though you don't catch every word, the tone makes it clear. They're angry, they're urgent, and they want you to be angry and urgent too. You edge closer to a crowd gathered around a lawyer in a spotless toga. His voice is smooth, trained, practically designed for projection. He argues about property rights, something about a farmer's land being seized by a neighbour. The details are murky, but the crowd eats it up, nodding, booing, clapping at the right beats. Romans treat trials like theatre, and the forum is their stage. You half expect someone to sell popcorn. Historians still argue whether justice here leaned more toward fairness or toward whoever could shout the loudest. Judging by this performance, you're guessing the latter. The smells of the forum are just as intense as the sounds. Peddlers hawk roasted nuts, wine diluted with river water, and bread loaves so hard they could double as weapons. A beggar nearby reeks of sweat and dust, shaking a wooden bowl at passers-by. He mutters blessings, curses, or maybe both, depending on how many coins drop in. You consider giving him your single coin, but then remember it's the only thing standing between you and an empty stomach tonight. Survival once again wins over generosity. A quirky sight stops you mid-stride, a man parading a trained monkey dressed in a miniature toga. The little creature performs flips while its owner shouts for donations. The crowd laughs, tossing coins, and you can't help but think, here's Rome in a nutshell. Political speeches to your left, a monkey in a toga to your right, and you caught somewhere in between. Just then, you feel a tug at your belt. You whip around, but whoever tried to slip your coin purse is gone, swallowed by the mob. Your heart hammers. Pickpockets thrive here, darting through the throngs like eels. You clamp your hand on your belt, suddenly hyper-aware of every jostle. If Rome teaches you anything, it's paranoia. You try to escape the crush by moving toward the Senate steps. Senators in gleaming white togas, with purple stripes marking their elite status, sweep past. Their expressions range from self-importance to sheer boredom, as if carrying the weight of empire is both exhausting and dull. You wonder if they actually debate policy inside or just nap while pretending to listen. A guard blocks your path before you can find out, glaring like you've already committed treason. You back away quickly, cheeks burning. Still, the forum isn't just for politics. Merchants hawk goods in side corners, cloth dyed in garish colours, jewellery that may or may not be real gold, and trinkets carved into tiny gods for home shrines. You pause to examine a little figurine of Mercury, god of travellers. The vendor assures you it will protect you on your journeys. You're tempted, but with what money? You sigh, setting it back down carefully. Suddenly a herald blows a horn so loudly it rattles your bones. People rush toward the rostra, the speaker's platform, where a young politician climbs up. His toga is freshly pressed, his hair carefully curled. He launches into a fiery speech about corruption, grain shortages, and how Rome deserves better leadership. The crowd roars approval, though whether they agree with him or just enjoy the spectacle, you can't tell. A woman beside you mutters that he's only grandstanding to gain attention. You nod sagely, pretending you've been following Roman politics your whole life. As you stand there, sweating in the press of bodies, you realize the Forum isn't just a marketplace of goods, it's a marketplace of voices. Everyone here is selling something: justice, influence, entertainment, hope. And everyone is buying, whether they mean to or not. The noise seeps into your head, relentless, until you can't tell where your thoughts end and Rome's clamour begins. To Esca, PE, you drift toward a shaded corner where a few philosophers debate under a portico. Their voices are calmer, measured, but no less intense. One insists the Stoic path is the only way to peace. Another mocks him, saying Epicureans live better. They bicker like academic rivals across time, and you wonder how many students have fallen asleep listening to this exact argument. Historians still argue whether these schools genuinely influenced Roman life or were just intellectual sparring clubs. Either way, the philosophers don't seem to care that the rest of the Forum is on fire with noise. They've got their own eternal shouting match to sustain. Finally, your head spins from the din. You stagger out of the Forum, ears ringing, brain buzzing like a beehive. You've survived the first round of Roman politics, law and chaos, but your energy is draining fast. You wonder what fresh torment the city will throw at you next, and deep down you suspect the answer involves soldiers. You barely catch your breath from the shouting in the Forum when the sharp blast of a trumpet splits the air again. This time it doesn't belong to a politician's herald, it's the call of military recruiters making their presence known. You freeze, realizing the men in crested helmets and polished cuirasses are scanning the crowd like wolves sniffing for stragglers. Their eyes gleam with a mix of pride and hunger, because every citizen they rope into the legions means another 20 years of service for the glory of Rome. You duck your head and try to blend in, but that never really works. A recruiter with sun-leathered skin and a scar slicing across his cheek spots you anyway. He strides over, boots clanging on the cobblestones, and plants himself directly in your path. His voice booms. Strong arms, healthy legs. You look like a soldier. You manage a weak smile and mutter something about being committed to your patron's errands. He squints, clearly unconvinced. The recruiter launches into his sales pitch. He paints vivid pictures of glory, marching beneath the eagle standard, conquering faraway lands, earning plunder and honour. He describes Gaul's forests, Britannia's misty shores, even whispers of Parthia's exotic riches. His words glitter like coins in the sun, but beneath the rhetoric you hear the truth. Sign up and you disappear into the army for 20 years. You'll face freezing nights in tents, hunger on campaign, and the very real chance of not coming back at all. A joke slips into your tired mind. In modern life, recruiters at least offer free pens or water bottles. Here, they offer death, taxes, and a wooden shield. Tempting. You shake your head politely, mumbling something about family responsibilities. The recruiter's smile drops. He leans in close enough that you smell leather and sweat. Rome always needs men, he growls. If not today, then tomorrow. He finally lets you slip past, but the weight of his words lingers like a shadow. Historians still argue whether military service was seen as honour or punishment for common citizens. Standing here with your heart pounding, you're leaning toward punishment. You stumble into a side street, trying to disappear from sight. The alley is quieter but no less threatening. Posters nailed to walls, painted placards really, announce the next round of gladiatorial games. Pictures of fighters with swords and nets promise blood and spectacle. Recruiters often prowl near these posters, hoping the thrill of violence convinces young men to swap freedom for a soldier's life. You quicken your pace. Further along, you hear the rhythmic thud of marching feet. A cohort of soldiers drills in the square, wooden swords clashing, shields banging in perfect synchronization. The noise vibrates through your bones, both impressive and terrifying. Their discipline is unmatched. They move like a single creature with 100 legs. Part of you admires them, the way you'd admire lions from the safety of a cage. The other part knows you'd crumble within a week of this routine. You already struggle to carry groceries. Imagine lugging 40 kilos of gear on forced marches across Europe. Quirky fact: Romans trained recruits by having them swing swords made twice as heavy as the real thing, so that in battle, the real weapons felt like feathers. It sounds clever until you picture your arms shaking like jelly after 5 minutes. And yes, drills went on for hours. As you skirt the edge of the square, an older veteran sits on a bench, his leg twisted from an old wound. He beckons you over with a weary grin. "Thinking of joining?" he asks. You shake your head quickly. He chuckles, then spits on the ground. "Wise. They promise you glory. You'll get mud, cold nights, and scars instead. Maybe one bronze coin at the end if you live that long." His laugh is hollow, the kind of laugh that comes from someone who's seen too much. You thank him quietly and slip away, carrying his warning in your chest. Yet, you can't entirely escape Rome's military machine. At the next corner, you pass a shrine to Mars, the god of war. Fresh flowers lie at the base, and someone has left a small loaf of bread as an offering. Children run past, giggling, waving sticks like swords, imitating the soldiers they idolize. It strikes you how deeply war is woven into Roman life. The city breathes it, bleeds it, glorifies it. You, on the other hand, would rather just find dinner. But the recruiters aren't done with you. Another group spots you as you try to cross a bridge. One calls out jokingly, "Don't run, citizen. We'll feed you better than your patron." You force a laugh, clutching your coin purse tighter. The truth is, the military probably would feed you better, for a while. But the price tag is your freedom, your future, maybe your life. By now, your nerves are frayed. You glance over your shoulder at every sound, half expecting armored men to pounce. The day feels heavier, as though the weight of a legion's shield presses down on your back. You remember your morning in the bathhose. Hues, the gossip, the laughter. It feels like a different lifetime. Here in the shadow of recruiters, survival means shrinking yourself, hoping the Empire overlooks you. Still, one image sticks with you as you leave the square, a young boy staring at the drilling soldiers with wide eyes. To him, the clashing shields are thunder, the banners are lightning, and Rome itself is a god. He will probably sign up one day, dreaming of glory. And maybe he'll survive long enough to sit on a bench decades later, warning some other fool not to join. You slip back into the maze of streets, heart hammering, grateful to have escaped conscription, for now. But Rome never really lets you escape. The soldiers are always watching, always marching, always reminding you that in this empire, survival isn't guaranteed. You wander farther from the forum, eager to put distance between yourself and the recruiters. But the city has other spectacles in mind. The distant clang of iron, the rhythmic thud of wooden practice swords, and the guttural shouts of men in unison pull you toward a walled compound. You peer through the gates and catch your breath. This is a gladiator school. Inside, the ludus is alive with brutal energy. Young men stripped to the waist glisten with sweat, swinging heavy wooden swords that look more like tree trunks than weapons. Trainers bark orders, their voices sharp whips cracking through the heat. Every few moments, one trainee stumbles under the force of a blow, only to be smacked back into line by an instructor's staff. This isn't fitness, it's survival training, plain and simple. You watch as two men square off in the sand, each gripping a practice shield the size of a door. They circle, feet kicking up dust, then crash together with a noise like collapsing furniture. One slips, the other pounces, and the downed fighter takes a wooden blade across the ribs. He groans, clutching his side. The instructor shouts for him to get up, and when he hesitates, a lash cracks across his back. There's no mercy here. Either you rise or you're left broken. A chill snakes down your spine. You'd imagined gladiators as heroic warriors, larger-than-life figures striding into the arena with confidence. The truth, standing in front of you, is men exhausted, beaten, pushed past their limits for the entertainment of others. Historians still argue whether gladiators were slaves forced into combat or volunteers chasing fame and reward. From your vantage point, the answer looks obvious. Most don't have a choice. Quirky detail. Some gladiators did achieve celebrity status, with fans scribbling graffiti about them on walls. One famous fighter, Crescens the Thracian, apparently had admirers swooning. It's a strange thought that while you're staring at bloodied knuckles and bruised ribs, someone else once carved Crescens' hot into a tavern wall. Rome adored its fighters even as it ground them to pieces. The smell of the training yard is sharp and raw. Sweat, dust, iron, and the faint metallic tang of blood. You cough lightly, covering your nose with your tunic. The sound draws the attention of a trainer who fixes you with a glare sharp enough to slice marble. Thinking of joining? He sneers. You shake your head so quickly your neck pops. He laughs, a harsh sound, and waves you away as though you're not worth a whip crack. You don't argue. You've had enough near-conscription moments today. Still, you linger, because despite the brutality, something magnetic holds your eyes. The way the fighters push through pain, the way they move like dancers of death. It's horrifying, yes, but also mesmerizing. The Empire thrives on this paradox, blood and beauty tangled in the same knot. At the far end of the yard you see a small group practicing with nets and tridents. They hurl nets with surprising grace, tangling their opponent's legs, then jab forward with prongs meant to pierce flesh. You wonder if fishmongers ever moonlight as gladiators. It looks oddly like casting for dinner. The men's faces are grim, though. There's no humour in the routine, just exhaustion and the silent knowledge that one day the practice will turn into the real thing under the roar of 50,000 spectators. A heavy thud jerks your attention back. One fighter collapses, his leg bent at an unnatural angle. The trainer doesn't rush to help. He just sighs, waves for two assistants, and they drag the injured man away like a broken cartwheel. You realize grimly that injuries aren't if, they're when. Survival here isn't about skill alone. It's about enduring pain most people couldn't imagine. As you step back from the gate, your stomach twists. You picture yourself in that sandpit, wooden sword trembling in your hand, sweat stinging your eyes, the crowd's roar pressing down like thunder. One wrong move, and the sand becomes your grave. You mutter aloud, "Nope, not for me," earning a curious glance from a woman passing by. She smirks knowingly. Perhaps she's seen enough gladiators to understand that no sane person would volunteer for this. But Rome thrives on the spectacle. Posters plastered across nearby walls advertise the next games at the Colosseum. They promise exotic animals, lions, tigers, even crocodiles battling men in staged hunts. They brag of seasoned gladiators facing off in duels to the death, though in truth sometimes they spared good fighters for the sake of ticket sales. The marketing is shameless and the people love it. The games are Rome's ultimate drug. Distraction, excitement, a release from daily grind, bread and circuses, quite literally. You turn away, legs heavy, realizing you've glimpsed one of the Empire's ugliest truths. The baths earlier were noisy, the forum was chaotic, but this is raw humanity forced into spectacle. You shiver despite the heat, clutch your tunic tighter, and whisper to yourself you wouldn't last a day in the sand. Yet as you leave the ludus, a small boy runs up with a wooden toy sword, swinging it at imaginary foes. His mother laughs, cheering him on. To them, gladiators aren't broken men, they're heroes, legends, proof of Rome's power. And that, perhaps, is the cruelest trick of all. You push into the sunlight again, the sounds of clashing wood fading behind you. The city is alive with new noises, new demands, new dangers. And though your stomach growls and your legs ache, you keep moving. Because in Rome, stopping means being swallowed whole. Your legs carry you away from the gladiator school, though the echoes of thudding practice swords still seem to rattle inside your skull. By now the sun stands high overhead, pressing down with relentless heat, and your stomach growls like an angry guard dog. Rome may boast about its grandeur, but for most of its citizens, midday is less about glory and more about gnawing hunger. You shuffle toward a cluster of food stalls, hoping to find something, anything, that doesn't smell like fermented fish guts. The first stall you pass sells bowls of thin barley porridge, a staple for common folk. You hand over your hard-earned coin and receive a steaming ladleful in a chipped clay bowl. The porridge looks like beige sludge, hardly inspiring confidence, but hunger doesn't allow pride. You blow on it and take a cautious spoonful. It's warm, bland, and clings to your tongue with the texture of wet plaster. You swallow anyway, convincing yourself this is nourishment. A fly immediately lands on the rim of your bowl. You shoo it away, only for two more to buzz in as if invited. Soon you're performing a desperate ballet of spooning mush into your mouth while swatting at insects. A man across from you doesn't bother, he just scoops his porridge with fingers, shoving it in while flies land freely on the rest. You try not to watch, though you can't look away. Quirky detail. Romans didn't really use forks. At best you had spoons, knives and hands. Table manners were optional, and clearly, so was shooing away flies. You move toward another stall where a woman fries chickpea patties on a flat pan, the sizzle and pop reminding you faintly of modern street food. The smell, at least, is pleasant, earthy with hints of herbs. You scrape together your last coin for one patty, crisp at the edges, soft in the centre. It's the best thing you've eaten all day, and you close your eyes in bliss until you notice the cook wiping sweat from her brow directly into the batter. You pause mid-bite, then shrug. Survival trumps squeamishness. As you chew, two men nearby argue about the price of bread. One insists bakers are cheating the scales, sneaking hollow loaves into the market. The other claims the emperor should raise the grain dole. Historians still argue how widespread fraud was in Roman bakeries, but considering the way these loaves feel like hollow bricks, you're inclined to believe the worst. You imagine biting into bread only to discover half of it is air, a cruel trick when you're starving. Then, as if on cue, a vendor shouts about honey cakes. He gestures toward a tray of small golden pastries that glisten in the sunlight. They look heavenly, sweet enough to redeem even the worst porridge. You step closer, heart quickening, until he announces the price. 5 times what you paid for porridge. Your shoulders slump. Honey is expensive here, imported and rare. For nobles, honey cakes are snacks. For you, they're fantasies. You back away slowly, pretending you weren't interested anyway. The heat intensifies, and you search for shade, clutching your bowl of barley as it thickens into cement. You find a fountain trickling with water, surrounded by thirsty citizens filling jars. You cup your hands and sip, wincing at the metallic tang. Romans prided themselves on aqueducts, true, but by the time water reached your lips, it tasted like stone and rust. You glance down at the cloudy surface and wonder what's floating in it. You drink anyway. Nearby, a street performer juggles clay pots, balancing them precariously on his head, while children shriek with laughter. For a moment the crowd feels almost festive. You lean against a pillar, porridge bowl empty now, and allow yourself to drift in the rhythm of the city. A dog barks, coins clink, vendors shout, and the smell of roasting meat wafts through the air. You follow your nose to another stall where skewers of mystery meat hiss over coals. The vendor swears it's lamb. Judging by the smell, it might be rat. You take a step back, stomach gurgling in protest. Better hungry than poisoned. You pat your belly, whispering, maybe later, though you know later rarely improves the menu. Suddenly, the peace breaks. A beggar lurches forward, grasping your arm, his eyes wild with desperation. He pleads for a bite of food, his breath sour and hot against your face. You freeze, torn between sympathy and fear. Before you can answer, a guard shoves him aside with the blunt end of a spear. The beggar stumbles, curses, then vanishes into the crowd. Your chest tightens. Rome has no safety nets. Hunger carves hard lines between survival and ruin. You glance at the people around you. Some chew contentedly, some haggle furiously, some hover empty-handed. The divide is stark, and you realize again how fragile your own survival is. One missed dole, one stolen coin purse, and you'd be that beggar. You wipe your sweaty palms in your tunic, promising yourself you'll guard what little you have with everything you've got. A quirky thought drifts in as you spot a vendor selling boiled eggs dyed in bright colors. Romans apparently enjoyed adding pigments to foods just for show. You imagine peeling a bright green egg, biting in and wondering if it's safe or if you've just invented the world's first food poisoning. Still, the children squeal with delight, holding their rainbow eggs aloft like treasures. Your lunch ends as unceremoniously as it began, flies buzzing, porridge cementing in your stomach, and heat pressing down like a second tunic. You rub your belly and sigh. Rome may boast about conquest and marble, but for you, survival tastes like bland mush and fried chickpeas. As you push away from the market stalls, the afternoon stretches before you, full of blazing sun and heavier burdens. Your mind drifts briefly to the baths, to the recruiters, to the gladiators, all those images layering atop the porridge in your belly. The day isn't even half over, and already you're weary. But Rome doesn't care. Rome marches on, loud, hot and hungry, and you, wobbling on tired legs, must march with it, wondering what fresh ordeal will arrive before the sun sets. The sun beats down harder now, a blazing coin nailed to the sky, and the city begins to shimmer like it's been dropped inside an oven. You clutch your tunic tighter and wipe sweat from your brow, realizing why so many Romans take breaks during the hottest part of the day. Shade is no luxury, it's survival. You duck under a colonnade for a moment, feeling the relief of cool stone against your back, but the respite doesn't last. The streets beckon you onward, each step a battle against the punishing heat. The stones beneath your sandals are warm enough to bake bread. You shuffle faster, imagining the soles melting into the grooves carved by centuries of wagon wheels. Somewhere a vendor fans himself with a palm frond while muttering about how the gods are angry again. Superstition thrives in this climate. Every odd gust of wind, every drought, every scorching sunbeam can be explained as divine mood swings. Historians still argue whether most Romans genuinely believed this, or if it was simply convenient theatre to justify complaining. Either way, you're muttering curses of your own, though directed at Apollo's burning chariot. A donkey brays loudly, startling you as it lumbers past with jars slung across its back. Its owner wipes his neck with a rag that's already soaked through, then tosses the rag aside like it's useless. You think about modern luxuries, cold water on demand, fans humming in bedrooms, maybe even air conditioning. Here, your best option is standing perfectly still in the shade, hoping sweat evaporates before your tunic glues itself permanently to your skin. As you press on, you notice how the city itself adapts. Awnings stretch over market stalls, casting pools of dappled shadow. Children run barefoot to fountains, splashing water over their heads, shrieking with laughter. Men lounge against shaded walls, pretending they have important business but rear. Ally, just trying to survive the midday blaze. Rome has no siesta carved into its schedule, but the lull is palpable. Work slows, tempers shorten, and everyone prays for the evening breeze. You pause at a small square where a storyteller draws a modest crowd. His voice carries despite the heat as he recounts tales of great battles and heroic generals. Sweat streams down his forehead, but his hands dance through the air as he paints pictures of victories won beneath the eagle standards. Children gape wide-eyed while adults nod solemnly. It's an odd form of air conditioning, not cooling the body but distracting the mind. For a few minutes, even you forget the sun searing your scalp, lost instead in the cadence of ancient propaganda. The illusion breaks when a vendor thrusts a jug of water under your nose. Fresh from the aqueduct, he insists. You squint into the jug. True, the water looks clearer than the fountains, but the price gouges deeper than the thirst. You hesitate, torn between dehydration and debt. With a sigh, you hand over a few precious coins, gulping the cool liquid before realizing it's faintly metallic and oddly warm. Still, it soothes your cracked throat, and you mutter that sometimes survival is worth the scam. A quirky sight distracts you, a man smearing what looks like white chalk across his face. Curious, you edge closer, only to learn it's a primitive form of sunscreen. Romans experimented with odd protective creams, including mixtures of olive oil, resin, and, yes, sometimes crocodile dung. You whisper a small thank you to modern SPF. The man catches your stare and winks proudly as if to say, "Mock me now, but who'll avoid wrinkles later?" You bite back a laugh and shuffle onward. The heat breeds irritability. Two men collide at a corner, spilling one's basket of figs. Voices rise, hands gesture wildly, and soon they're bickering about who owes whom. A crowd gathers instantly. Romans never resist a public squabble. Some cheer, some jeer, a few even place bets. You step back cautiously, knowing full well how quickly such sparks can ignite into fists. The altercation fizzles when a guard appears, but not before one man storms off, muttering about curses. You exhale slowly. The hours drag. Your head grows heavy, your steps slower. You notice more beggars slumped in shaded corners, their hands limp, too weary to even beg properly. Heat doesn't just drain, it destroys. A woman fans her child with a scrap of cloth, both of them looking wilted, as though they might collapse into the dust. You avert your gaze, guilty for having at least swallowed a bowl of porridge earlier. You try to keep your mind alert with observation. The marble temples gleam so brightly you have to squint. The whiteness reflects the sun like a mirror. Perhaps the gods enjoy blinding their worshippers. Statues, too, stare down with indifferent stone eyes, unbothered by weather. You envy them their stillness. Finally, you stumble into a shaded arcade, lungs heaving. A group of men recline there, sipping watered wine, fanning themselves with palm leaves. They joke lazily about the emperor's obsession with building projects, how he drains coffers for new aqueducts while their sandals wear thin. You chuckle faintly at the sarcasm. Some humour survives even under the cruelest sun. Historians still argue whether climate made midday life nearly impossible in Rome or whether the people simply exaggerated. Standing here, drenched in sweat, head pounding, you'd vote for nearly impossible. No wonder Romans flock to baths, fountains, shaded courtyards, anywhere that offers momentary relief. You push onward again, legs stiff, as the air itself seems to thicken. The dream of air conditioning floats in your brain like a cruel mirage. Instead, you resign yourself to heat, dust, and the slow crawl of hours. Every breath feels like inhaling fire, every step like trudging through sand. You mutter again, you wouldn't last a day here, and the sun, blazing down without mercy, seems to agree. Your head throbs from the heat as you stagger toward a square where noise gathers like a storm. The sound isn't hammering, or market haggling, or even soldiers drilling. It's laughter, groans, and the unmistakable rise and fall of a crowd reacting to a performance. Curiosity pulls you closer until you find yourself at the edge of a small theatre, its wooden stage set against the backdrop of painted scenery. Actors in oversized masks strut and bellow, their gestures so exaggerated you wonder if they're trying to signal ships at sea. You squeeze into the crowd. There's no ticket here, no velvet rope, just bodies pressing against each other, eager for a glimpse of distraction. The actor on stage launches into a monologue about an unlucky merchant, his mask carved with a ridiculous frown, nose drooping like a wilted cucumber. Every syllable is dragged out, every gesture enormous. It's theatrical enough to make Shakespeare blush. The audience roars with laughter when he trips, rolling on the stage like a dying beetle. You smirk despite yourself. Roman comedy isn't subtle, but it works. A second actor joins, wearing a mask with a leering grin. He delivers punchlines that, judging by the cackles, probably involve bodily functions. You don't need to understand every word to catch the tone. It's humor aimed low, and the crowd eats it up. Quirky tidbit. Romans adored slapstick. Jokes about flatulence, gluttony, and cheating wives filled their stages. Highbrow? Hardly. Effective? Absolutely. As you shift in the crowd, a man beside you mutters that the play mocks a famous senator. You glance sharply at him. Is that true or just rumour? Historians still argue whether Roman theatre doubled as satire or whether most audiences just enjoyed the pratfalls. Either way, it's a dangerous game to lampoon powerful men when they're still alive. The actor slips into another joke, and the audience howls again. Maybe Rome is bold enough to laugh at itself, at least until the senator arrives with soldiers. The smell of sweat thickens around you. People press shoulder to shoulder, fanning themselves with scraps of cloth, shouting over each other's laughter. A child perched on his father's shoulders claps furiously, eyes wide with delight. For a moment, the city's misery fades, replaced by shared amusement. You almost forget the porridge cement in your stomach and the flies that tried to join you for lunch. Then the tone shifts. The actors swap masks, stepping into tragedy. Their movements slow, voices deepen, and the crowd hushes. One actor clutches his chest, wailing about fate, while another raises his arms toward the heavens. The shift is abrupt but effective. You feel the hairs on your neck rise. Romans believed theatre could teach morality, warn about hubris, and remind audiences of divine justice. The moral hits hard even through a mask. The actor's anguish feels uncomfortably real. But the hush doesn't last. A heckler in the back shouts an insult, and the crowd erupts with laughter. The actor falters, trying to continue, but more jeers fly. "Speak louder," one man hollers. "Take off the mask," yells another. The performance devolves into chaos as the audience entertains itself by taunting the players. You realize Roman theatre is as much about the spectators as the stage. Here, no one is safe from ridicule. Not the actors, not the characters, not even the audience. You shuffle backward, weary of the press of bodies. Outside the theatre, vendors hover like vultures, selling roasted nuts, watered wine, and small trinkets shaped like comedy masks. One thrusts a cup at you, insisting you'll laugh harder if you drink. You politely decline. Your stomach has suffered enough today. Still, the festive energy lingers in your bones. You pause near a wall plastered with graffiti. Some of it praises actors by name. Lucius makes us laugh until our ribs ache. Another declares bluntly, "This play stinks." You chuckle softly. Human nature hasn't changed. Audience reviews, 2,000 years before comment sections, and no, they weren't kinder back then. As you turn to leave, the distant sound of music drifts from another theatre. Romans had a taste for variety, comedies, tragedies, mimes, even pantomimes with no words, just music and elaborate gestures. Some shows featured risque humour, others leaned into myth retellings. Entertainment wasn't a side dish here, it was baked into daily life. If the games provided blood, the theatre provided laughter and catharsis. Both were vital distractions from the grind of survival. The sun has begun to soften, shadows stretching longer. The crowd disperses, buzzing with the day's performance, debating which jokes hit hardest or which masks were funniest. You slip away, head buzzing with the aftertaste of laughter and jeers. In your mind, you replay the slapstick fall of the frowning merchant and the tragic cries of the hero doomed by fate. Both linger, strange companions on your weary march through Rome. Entertainment in this city doesn't simply amuse, it swallows you whole, wrings out your emotions and tosses you back into the street, a little lighter, a little wearier, a little more convinced that Rome survives not just on bread, but on noise, spectacle, and distraction. As you wipe sweat from your forehead again, you whisper, "Maybe I'd survive one day if it were all theatre." But even as you say it, your gut knows the truth. The city's next ordeal waits just around the corner, hungrier than you are. The laughter from the theatre still rings faintly in your ears as you drift back into the winding streets. The mood, however, shifts quickly. Where moments ago you watched actors trip and tumble, now you find yourself swept into the slow-moving mass of bodies surging toward a massive, warehouse-like structure. The air feels heavier here, humming with desperation. This is the Horea, Rome's grain distribution center, the lifeline for thousands of citizens who can't afford to feed themselves otherwise. You join the line, clutching your empty basket like everyone else. The queue snakes down the street, packed shoulder to shoulder with men, women, and children. Some look resigned, others fidget impatiently, and a few clutch their bellies, too hungry to hide it. A toddler cries, his mother rocking him absent-mindedly as she stares at the front of the line with hollow eyes. It's not entertainment here, it's survival. A clerk stands on a platform shouting names from a wax tablet. Each name called is a small miracle. It means grain, it means bread, it means another day. When your neighbor's name is shouted, he pumps his fist like he's just won a prize fight. He staggers forward, receives his ration of wheat and cradles it against his chest like treasure. And in a sense, it is. Historians still argue whether the grain dole was a stabilizing act of generosity or a cynical trick to keep the poor from rioting. Standing here, sandwiched between sweaty strangers, you know it's both. The smell of the warehouse hits you before you reach it. Dust from the grain fills the air, thick enough to make you cough. Inside, men scoop the wheat with wooden shovels, dumping it into sacks with mechanical precision. Their arms move endlessly, sweat dripping, mouths set in grim lines. A guard watches from the corner, spear in hand, making sure no one takes more than their share. The sight of his armor glinting in the sun makes your chest tighten. Rome does not trust its own hungry citizens without steel to keep order. A fight erupts near the front. Two men argue over a dropped sack, voices sharp as daggers. One shoves, the other swings, and in seconds they're grappling in the dust. The crowd surges forward instinctively, shouting, egging them on, but before it escalates further, the guard steps in, jabbing his spear between them. He shouts a command and the men separate, spitting curses but backing down. The line creaks back into order, though the tension remains thick. You shuffle forward, heart racing, gripping your basket tighter. You finally reach the clerk. He eyes you suspiciously, scanning his tablet, then calls your name, your false Romanized name, the one you mumbled earlier in hopes of blending in. For a second, you think he'll call you out as an imposter, but then he shrugs and waves you forward. Relief floods through you as a worker dumps a portion of wheat into your basket. It's heavy, awkward, and more precious than gold in this moment. Quirky fact, Romans didn't hand out baked bread, only raw grain. That meant you still needed a mill to grind it and an oven to bake it. For most citizens without such luxuries, that meant lugging the grain to a communal bakery, waiting in line again, and paying a fee. Your victory feels fleeting, like winning a puzzle but losing the instructions. Still, you cradle the wheat carefully, whispering thanks under your breath. As you step back into the street, you catch sight of a woman who wasn't so lucky. She argues with the clerk, waving her arms, insisting her family was skipped. The clerk shakes his head, unmoved. Her voice cracks into sobs, her basket empty. People pass her by without stopping. You look down at your own sack, then away, guilt pooling in your chest. Survival in Rome rarely leaves room for sharing. You shuffle toward a communal mill, the line stretching almost as long as the one you just left. Donkeys plod in circles, turning grinding stones that crush grain into flour. The air is full of white dust coating your skin, making you cough again. Children giggle as they draw shapes in the flour piles, their parents too tired to scold them. The scene is part misery, part absurdity. You can't decide whether to laugh or cry. By the time your turn comes, the sun has slid lower, painting long shadows across the street. Your sack is lighter now, the wheat transformed into coarse flour. You hand over another coin at the communal bakery, where ovens roar with heat. The bakers, their faces blackened with soot, shove loaves in and out with long paddles, their movements as relentless as soldiers drilling. You wonder how they stand the heat, already unbearable outside. You finally receive a rough, flat loaf, hard, cracked, but edible. You clutch it greedily, breaking off a piece, chewing slowly despite the dryness. Crumbs stick in your throat, but hunger makes it taste almost good. Almost. As you eat, you overhear muttering. A man whispers that grain shipments from Africa have been delayed. Another claims a corrupt governor pocketed half the cargo. Tension simmers under the surface. One missed shipment, one bad harvest, and this line could turn into a riot. Historians still argue whether Rome's empire depended more on its legions or its grain supply. Watching the crowd, you suspect too. He bread mattered more than the swords. You tuck the rest of the loaf into your basket, already calculating how to stretch it for tomorrow. The day isn't done, and you still need to find your way home before nightfall. You glance once more at the endless line of hungry faces, the dust swirling in the air, the guards standing watch. Rome may rule the world, but here, survival comes one loaf at a time. And as you step back into the streets, the weight of that truth presses on you heavier than the sack of grain you just carried. The weight of the flour and the half-eaten loaf hangs heavy in your basket as you step into a quieter lane, but Rome never stays quiet for long. Almost immediately you pass a small shrine tucked into the wall between two shops. Smoke curls lazily from a dish of smouldering incense, the scent sweet and bitter at once. Offerings of figs, olives, and a coin or two rest at the base of a tiny statue, Mercury, judging by the winged cap perched on his marble head. You pause, realizing how many shrines you've passed without really noticing. The city hums with gods, tucked into corners and crossroads, as constant as the clatter of sandals on stone. A man kneels before the shrine, murmuring a prayer under his breath. He bows, touches the statue and moves on, his expression calmer than before. You wonder if it worked, if the god actually heard him. Historians still argue whether Romans truly believed their prayers swayed the divine or if the rituals were simply habit, woven so deeply into life that skipping them felt dangerous. Either way, you suddenly feel self-conscious, as though Mercury himself is glaring at you for ignoring him. You drop a crumb of your loaf at the base, not generous, but hopefully enough to keep the god off your back. The road curves and you find yourself at a larger temple. Marble steps rise before you, flanked by towering columns that cast long shadows. At the top, priests in flowing robes chant as smoke from a sacrificial altar drifts skyward. You step closer, catching sight of the sacrifice itself, a chicken, its feathers singed, blood dripping into a bronze bowl. The priest scatters the blood, murmuring words you don't understand, while the crowd bows their heads. The smell is sharp, metallic, layered atop incense and burning herbs. You shift uncomfortably. Animal sacrifice is common here, and yet the sight unsettles you. The priests claim the gods, demand it, that Rome itself stands because these rituals keep the divine appeased. But a voice in your head mutters that maybe Rome survives because of soldiers, grain ships, and brutal taxes. Still, you bow your head like everyone else. better safe than sorry when chickens and gods are involved. A woman beside you whispers about omens, how the way the bird's liver looks will predict whether Rome prospers or suffers. You blink, surprised. Divination by entrails is a serious business here. Quirky detail. Specialized priests called haruspices claim to read the will of the gods in the organs of sacrificed animals. You imagine holding up a slimy liver and saying, "Ah yes, victory in battle." You almost laugh, then quickly smother it. The crowd around you takes this very seriously, and you don't feel like getting smote by lightning for your sarcasm. Further along, you encounter another ritual, this one simpler. At a crossroads, a small altar stands with fresh garlands of flowers. Travelers pause to pour a bit of wine or toss a coin before continuing. You realize Romans carry their gods everywhere, into their homes, their streets, their markets. Religion isn't once a week, it's every day, every corner, every decision. Even graffiti sometimes invokes the divine, pleas scratched into walls for protection, curses against enemies. You glance at the scrawled Latin on a nearby post, wondering if it's a shopping list or a spell. The deeper you wander, the more gods you meet. A temple to Jupiter looms grand and intimidating, its steps crowded with supplicants. A smaller shrine to Venus drips with flowers, women leaving combs and ribbons as offerings. The variety dazzles you, overwhelming in its scope. Rome doesn't settle for one god, it hoards them, collects them like trophies from every land it conquers. You half expect to stumble across a shrine to some distant deity you've never heard of, and honestly, you probably would. A priest catches your eye and beckons you closer. Nervously, you obey. He gestures toward the altar and instructs you to offer something, anything, in honor of the gods. Your hands fumble through your basket until you find a few crumbs of bread. You place them on the altar, cheeks burning with embarrassment at the meagerness. The priest nods solemnly, as though you've given a treasure, and intones a blessing in return. You breathe easier, relieved to have escaped without a lecture or a fee. Still, the rituals cling to your mind. You recall the crocodile dung sunscreen you saw earlier, and can't help but connect it to the same human instinct. Survival wrapped in ritual, whether physical or spiritual. If the sun doesn't kill you, maybe the gods will. Either way, you're at their mercy. As the day tilts into late afternoon, chants and hymns echo across the city, mingling with the noise of vendors and carts. The sacred and the profane exist side by side here, inseparable. You pass a group of children skipping rope, chanting rhymes about Jupiter, their voices sweet and shrill. You chuckle softly. Imagine playing hopscotch while invoking the king of gods. Only in Rome. Historians still argue whether Romans were deeply devout or simply pragmatic, performing rituals to cover their bases. Watching the city around you, you think it doesn't matter. Belief here is less about faith and more about function. Offer to Mercury so your trade succeeds. Pray to Mars so your son survives the army. Burn incense to Jupiter so the emperor stays in power and the grain ships keep coming. It's less theology, more insurance policy. You slip past one last shrine, this one so tiny it almost blends into the wall. A flickering lamp glows inside, the flame trembling in the evening breeze. You stop, whisper a quick thanks, not sure to whom, not sure for what, then move on. Because in Rome, whether you believe or not, the gods are always watching, and you, like everyone else, can't afford to take the chance of ignoring them. You leave the last shrine behind and step into another stretch of the city, but instead of incense and chanting, a different smell greets you, one that makes your nose wrinkle instantly. It's sharp, sour, unmistakable, urine and sewage. You've wandered past a row of public latrines. The odor wafts through the street like a challenge, daring you to breathe. You clutch your loaf tighter and quicken your pace, but curiosity pulls your eyes sideways. Rows of stone seats with holes carved into them line the walls of an open chamber. Men sit shoulder to shoulder, chatting casually while doing their business, like it's a social club rather than a restroom. A stream of water flows beneath the seats, carrying waste away, or at least that's the idea. You shudder. Privacy? Forget it. Rome treats bodily functions as just another communal event. Quirky fact: sponges on sticks served as toilet paper, shared among users and rinsed in a bucket of salt water. You gag at the thought, swearing to yourself you'll never complain about flimsy modern tissue again. As you escape the smell, you pass a group of workers carrying amphorae of wine. Their laughter fills the street, but the moment they pop one jar open, the stench tells you something's wrong. You're curious enough to accept a sip when one offers. The wine tastes metallic, strangely sweet, with an aftertaste that reminds you of chewing on pennies. And then you remember, Romans used lead vessels in winemaking. The sweetness you taste isn't sugar, it's lead acetate. Historians still argue whether chronic lead poisoning contributed to Rome's decline. You don't need a scholarly debate to know one thing: your head already aches. Further down, the hazards multiply. Water trickles from a fountain, but the basin is green with slime. A boy splashes happily, filling a jug for his family. You hesitate, throat dry, but the memory of that metal. Ike wine keeps you from drinking. Instead, you watch a stray dog lap it up, and even the dog looks regretful. A cart rattles past, its wheels creaking under a load of amphorae labelled with fish sauce. The smell bursts free as one jar cracks, gagging everyone nearby. Flies swarm instantly. You cough and stumble away, eyes watering. Rome isn't just noisy, it's pungent in every possible way. The city is an olfactory assault course, alternating between bread ovens, incense, sewage, and rot. You glance at the tenements rising above you, multi-story insula crammed with families. Their wooden balconies lean precariously, laundry flapping like surrender flags. Buckets of waste sometimes tumble from those windows, and you find yourself instinctively hugging the building walls to avoid becoming collateral damage. Fires are another danger. The wooden beams, the oil lamps, the crowded rooms all combine into tinderboxes. You hear distant shouts and wonder if another insula has already caught flame. One neighbor warns you to tread carefully. Disease prowls in places like these. Public baths, crowded streets, latrines, contaminated water, all are breeding grounds. Fevers spread quickly, coughs echo through walls, and sometimes entire families vanish in weeks. Quirky tidbit: Roman doctors prescribed cures like crushed herbs, boiled mice, or wearing amulets. Historians still argue how effective Roman medicine truly was. Judging by the pale faces you see leaning from windows, the answer leans toward not very. You pass a man selling miracle potions from a cart. He waves colorful bottles and promises cures for everything from headaches to heartbreak. People gather, hopeful, desperate. You watch him pour the liquid into cups. It smells like vinegar mixed with honey. Maybe it helps, maybe it's a scam. Rome doesn't really care. In a city this crowded, belief in cures can be as powerful as cures themselves. The hazards aren't limited to what you eat or drink. Even the very walls of the city hide danger. Lead pipes deliver water and crumbling plaster flakes into the air. Children chase each other through clouds of dust, inhaling it without a thought. You cough again, lungs scratching. You think about how modern people complain about pollution, then laugh weakly. Rome invented it early. Still, not everything is bleak. You stumble into a perfumery, the sweet scent of rose oil flooding your nose in blessed contrast to sewage and fish sauce. Tiny glass bottles glimmer on shelves filled with perfumes imported from Egypt, Syria, and beyond. You inhale deeply, closing your eyes. Relief washes over you. Then you spot the price tags, small fortunes for a single vial. For nobles, perfume masks the stink of the city. For you, survival means living with it. You step back into the street, back into the stench. The sun begins to slip lower, the heat easing slightly, but the hazards remain. You stop to rest at a fountain, watching as a physician scribbles something on a wax tablet. He's prescribing a treatment, you realize, but his patient looks skeptical. You overhear words about bloodletting and herbs. The patient winces. You can't blame him. You'd rather risk the fever than the cure. As you trudge onward, your loaf of bread bumping against your side, you realize how fragile Roman life is. Food might poison you, water might sicken you, fire might consume you, waste might drown you in steam. Every street corner carries risk. Every sip of wine could shorten your days. Survival here isn't just hard, it's a gamble played with loaded dice. You whisper to yourself, half a prayer, half a joke, if I don't die from hunger, the plumbing will finish me off. And the city, with its reeking breath and gleaming marble temples, seems to nod in agreement. Word count, 1,107. The stink of the latrines still clings to your tunic as you wander deeper into the maze of streets, and soon the sounds of raised voices drift toward you. This time it isn't vendors arguing over fish prices or actors being heckled in the theatre, it's the sharp edge of authority meeting desperation. You follow the noise cautiously until you find a crowd gathered around a wooden post in a small square. A man stands bound, his wrists tied, his face pale beneath the sun. A magistrate in a crisp toga sits nearby on a folding chair, his expression detached, as though this is just another chore in his busy day. Soldiers flank him, their spears gleaming, while a scribe scratches notes into a wax tablet. The charges are read aloud. Theft from a marketplace stall. The accused insists he only took a crust of bread to feed his family. His words fall like stones into silence. The magistrate doesn't flinch. Then, with a nod, the punishment begins. A soldier steps forward with a whip tipped in knots. The man cries out as lashes crack against his back, his body jerking with each strike. The crowd murmurs, some watching grimly, others turning away. You grip your bread basket tighter, stomach twisting. This is Rome's version of justice, public, brutal, meant as much to terrify the spectators as to correct the criminal. Historians still argue whether such punishments reduced crime or simply spread fear. You don't need a historian, you can feel the fear yourself. When the whipping ends, the man collapses, barely conscious. He's cut loose and dragged aside. The magistrate moves on to the next case, his voice steady, as if he's reading grocery lists. Someone else steps forward accused of cheating on a contract. For him, the penalty is a hefty fine, paid immediately or faced with seizure of property. The difference between the two cases is obvious. Wealth buys softer consequences. You mutters. Ter under your breath, realizing Roman law is less about equality and more about hierarchy. Nobles and senators enjoy privileges, while ordinary citizens face the lash. Slaves fare even worse. Punishments for them include branding, forced labor, or execution by crucifixion. You shiver at the thought. Rome's famous order is built on a foundation of pain. A quirky detail unfolds before your eyes. The scribe occasionally pauses to scratch insults into the margins of his wax tablet, mocking the accused. One boy peeks over his shoulder and snickers. It seems even Roman court clerks weren't above doodling at work. You almost laugh, then stop yourself. The humor feels sour in this setting. The session continues. A pickpocket is dragged forward, kicking and spitting. He's sentenced to branding on the forehead, a hot iron pressed into his skin as the smell of burning flesh fills the square. The crowd gasps. You swallow hard, fighting nausea. The pickpocket's screams echo long after he collapses. Guards hoist him up and shove him aside, face scarred for life, marked forever as a criminal. Nearby, a woman whispers to her neighbor that such punishments keep the city safe. Another shakes his head, muttering that the magistrates enjoy cruelty too much. Historians still argue whether Roman punishments were effective deterrents or theatrical displays of control. You decide it's both. The lesson is clear. Rome forgives little, forgets nothing, and makes examples of everyone. As the crowd disperses, you catch sight of a wall etched with laws in neat lettering. It's the 12 Tables, Rome's ancient code carved so everyone could see. The idea was noble, laws accessible to all so justice wouldn't be hidden in the minds of the elite. But as you read the words, you realize they're less about fairness and more about control. One rule states that a debtor who fails to pay may be bound in chains, even cut to pieces if multiple creditors demand repayment. Your stomach churns. Suddenly your little coin purse feels even more fragile. You edge away from the square, heart heavy. On another corner, 2 guards haul a shouting man down the street. His crime? Insulting a senator. You glance at the soldiers' grim faces and realize free speech isn't much safer here than theft. A careless word can earn you lashes or worse. You clamp your lips shut, suddenly grateful your sarcasm earlier at the theatre wasn't overheard. A child tugs at your tunic, begging for bread. You hand him a crumb, but his mother quickly pulls him back, whispering about thieves and punishment. Even kindness is suspect here, twisted by fear. You sigh, feeling the city's weight pressing harder. As evening light slants across the rooftops, you pass a small shrine to Justitia, the goddess of justice, her scales balanced perfectly in marble. You can't help but scoff. The scales here are tilted, and everyone knows it. You mutter, "Not very balanced, is it?" and hurry on before the goddess decides to prove you wrong. Rome brags about law and order, but what you've seen tells a harsher truth. Order here is kept not by fairness but by fear. You clutch your breadbasket tighter, whispering to yourself, "Keep your head down, say nothing, steal nothing, survive." The sun dips lower, shadows growing longer, but the echo of screams still clings to the air. And you, weary traveller, know one thing clearly: you wouldn't last long if Rome ever turned its full justice on you. You carry the weight of that public punishment with you, and it colours the way you see everything else on the street. The square you enter next looks calm enough at first glance. Homes tucked neatly together, children playing with pebbles, women carrying baskets of laundry. But look closer and you see the real backbone of Roman society, the family, locked together under one roof and one authority. You're invited, or perhaps dragged politely, into the domus of a craftsman you met earlier. Stepping inside, you feel the air cool slightly, the thick stone walls holding back some of the day's heat. The atrium opens before you, a shallow pool at its center catching stray beams of evening light. At first it feels peaceful, almost inviting. Then you notice the sharp way everyone's eyes flick toward one man at the far end, the paterfamilias, the father of the household. He's not especially tall or muscular, but the authority in his posture is undeniable. His word is law here, literally. Roman family life revolved around the concept of patria potestas, the father's power over his wife, children, and even slaves. That power extends to life and death, though historians still argue whether fathers actually exercised such extremes or whether it remained more symbolic. Either way, the tension in the room makes you believe the possibility. The father gestures, and instantly the household springs into motion. His wife brings out a tray of bread and olives. His son kneels, presenting a wax tablet of accounts. Even the slaves move briskly, pouring watered wine, fetching cushions, adjusting lamps. You catch the daughter's eyes briefly. She looks away quickly, folding her hands in silence. You realize that her future will be arranged in this very room, her marriage decided by her father without her say. You're offered a seat at the edge of the dining couch. The bread is coarse, the olives sharp, but you chew gratefully. Conversation ripples around you, mostly the father lecturing about politics and trade. The son nods dutifully, occasionally scribbling notes. The wife adds nothing, only pouring more wine. The imbalance is stark, uncomfortable. In Rome, the family mirrors the empire itself. Authority flows from the top, unquestioned, down to those below. A quirky detail emerges when the father brags about his household gods. He gestures proudly toward the lararium, a small shrine in the corner where painted figures of ancestors and protective spirits stand. Fresh flowers and a bit of honey glisten there. The family bows their heads briefly in respect. Even here, religion weaves itself into the rhythm of daily life. You wonder if the ancestors ever glare down in disapproval, silently judging the family squabbles. As the evening stretches, you witness the hierarchy in subtle ways. The son dares to speak a suggestion about trade, and the father cuts him off with a single look. A slave fumbles with a jug, spilling a drop of wine, and everyone freezes until the father sighs and waves forgiveness. The wife asks quietly if she may step away to check on the loom, and the father grants permission with a nod, as though she's a guest in her own home. You imagine growing up in such a place, every decision weighed against your father's temper. You'd learn obedience early, silence earlier. Historians still argue whether Roman fathers ruled their households with iron fists or whether most settled into practical partnerships. The truth probably varied, but standing here, the atmosphere makes you lean toward the harsher interpretation. Later, when the meal winds down, the family gathers for storytelling. The father recounts a tale of his grandfather, a soldier who marched with Caesar. His voice swells with pride as he describes battles and victories, glossing over hardship. The children listen with wide eyes, though you notice the daughter's expression drift toward boredom. Stories, too, reinforce the hierarchy, honoring male ancestors, glorifying war, instilling duty. You nibble another olive and wonder what role you'd play if you belonged to such a household. Maybe the obedient son, scribbling notes. Maybe the silent daughter, married off at 15. Maybe the slave, invisible unless something goes wrong. None of the roles appeal, but Rome offers little choice. Before you leave, the father places a hand on your shoulder, his grip firm. He offers advice in a tone that brooks no argument. Respect your elders, honor your ancestors, obey the laws, and you'll live well in Rome. You nod, because what else can you do? But inside, you whisper the truth to yourself. Survival here feels less like living and more like enduring. As you step back into the street, the family's voices echo faintly behind you. The structure of Rome, the empire, the forum, the army, all of it begins at home, in rooms like that, under fathers like him. You tug your tunic tighter and glance at the fading sky. If this is family, no wonder the empire itself rules with such unyielding weight. The sun dips lower, shadows stretching across the streets, and the air fills with the smell of cooking fires. Evening in Rome means dinner, the main meal of the day, and though you're already weary, you follow the scents like a moth chasing smoke. The word is scena, and it isn't just about food. It's theatre, politics, and family hierarchy all rolled into one reclining posture. You're invited into the home of a wealthier acquaintance, someone higher on the social ladder than the craftsman's domus you visited earlier. The difference slaps you in the face immediately. The atrium here gleams with mosaics, oil lamps glow in bronze stands, and the couches for dining are padded with soft cushions. Slaves dart back and forth, adjusting everything down to the angle of lamps so shadows don't fall awkwardly on the guests' faces. You shuffle in awkwardly, feeling your dusty tunic betray your status before you even sit. The ritual begins with hand-washing, a slave pouring water over your fingers into a bronze basin. It feels luxurious compared to the public fountains, though you try not to think about how many hands the water has already touched today. You're guided to a reclining couch, left elbow propped, legs stretched sideways. Romans didn't sit at dinner like you do. They lounged, half reclined, trying to look elegant. You try it, nearly slipping off the cushion, earning a chuckle from the man beside you. He assures you you'll get used to it. You're not so sure. The first course arrives. Eggs, olives, and salad sprinkled with herbs. The olives gleam like polished stones, and the eggs are seasoned with garum, that same fish sauce you've been dodging all day. You nibble cautiously, the salt tang overpowering but not entirely unpleasant. Conversation hums around you. Guests flatter the host, praising the arrangement of dishes, the shine of the silverware. It feels more like performance than dining. Then comes the exotic fare, a tray of roasted dormice, yes, plump rodents, stuffed with nuts and honey. The host beams proudly, encouraging everyone to try. You stare at the tiny creatures, their curled bodies browned like pastries. You pick one up reluctantly, take a bite, and it's oddly sweet, the honey masking the meat. You swallow quickly, trying not to think too hard. Quirky fact, dormice were considered a delicacy in Rome, fattened in special jars before being cooked. You silently vow never to complain about plain bread again. More courses roll out, fish drizzled with sauce, pork sausages spiced heavily, platters of figs and dates glistening with syrup. Slaves refill cups constantly with watered wine, though some guests demand stronger pours. Soon, the room grows louder, laughter freer, as tongues loosen under the influence. You sip carefully. After that lead-flavored wine earlier, you're not eager to gamble again. One guest leans over to you, whispering gossip about the emperor's latest obsession with chariot races. Another brags about his cousin's new villa. A third loudly complains about grain shortages while simultaneously stuffing himself with figs. The irony is not lost on you. Historians still argue whether Roman feasts served primarily as meals or as stages for status display. Sitting here watching men boast louder with every bite, you're convinced it's the latter. Then the entertainment begins. A poet recites verses about love and betrayal, his voice rising dramatically with every line. Some guests clap politely, others roll their eyes. Next, a musician plucks a lyre, filling the room with soft, trembling notes that almost lull you to sleep. Finally, a jester stumbles in, juggling cups and cracking bawdy jokes that make the crowd roar with laughter. Food, wine, art, comedy. Dinner here is a circus contained within four walls. You lean back, your stomach stretched, your head buzzing faintly from wine fumes. You think back to your lunch of barley porridge and flies, and the contrast feels like whiplash. Rome is a city of extremes, extravagance for some, scraps for others. Tonight you glimpse the glittering side, but you can't forget the hungry faces still queuing outside bakeries. A slave approaches with a tray of sweet pastries glazed with honey. You take one, savoring the sticky warmth, then notice how tired the slave looks, eyes drooping, steps heavy. For him this feast isn't joy, it's endless labor. The imbalance needles at you. You recline on cushions stuffed with delicacies, while someone else sweats to refill your cup. Rome's wealth rests on the bent backs of many, and you can't shake the thought. The feast wanes down, laughter softening into lazy murmurs. Guests recline deeper, some dozing, others debating philosophy through slurred voices. One insists stoicism is the only path to virtue, another scoffs, declaring pleasure the true goal. The argument meanders, unresolved but passionately loud. You smile faintly, recognizing how debates over the good life never change, only the setting. When you finally step outside, the air feels cooler, the city hushed in twilight. Your stomach is full, your tunic sticky with wine drips, your head buzzing with noise and philosophy. For one evening, you've tasted Rome's extravagance. But as you glance back at the glowing lamps in the domus, you know you're only a guest. Tomorrow, it's back to porridge, flies, and the scramble for survival. The glow of lamps from the wealthy man's domus fades behind you as you step into the open night. The air is cooler now, but not comforting. Instead, it carries a restless energy, a sense that the city changes its mask after sunset. By day, Rome is loud, bustling, suffocating. By night, it's darker, edgier, and more dangerous. You hug your bread basket close and keep your eyes sharp. Oil lamps sputter on crooked posts, their flames flickering feebly against the wide shadow of the streets. They don't banish the dark, they only make it patchy, pockets of dim gold swimming in seas of black. Every alleyway seems to breathe, hiding shapes that move just as you approach. You step cautiously, sandals slapping the stones a little too loud in your own ears. Not far ahead, drunken laughter cuts through the air. A group of men stumble from a tavern, their voices slurred, their arms draped over each other. One sings off-key, another sways dangerously close to dropping his jug of wine. They notice you instantly, narrowing eyes in the dim light. "Hey, stranger," one slurs. "Spare a coin?" His tone wavers between cheer and threat. You mutter something polite, quickening your pace. The laughter follows you, sharp and mocking, until the sound finally fades behind. Quirky fact. Roman law technically forbade citizens from carrying weapons at night. But that hardly stopped anyone. Knives glint in the dark, clubs swing silently, and you realize most sensible Romans avoid wandering after sundown unless they must. You, unfortunately, must. The streets feel different now. Daytime noise softens into sinister echoes. The clatter of carts is replaced by whispers, by hurried footsteps, by the rustle of cloaks brushing walls. Somewhere in the distance a dog howls, the sound stretching long and eerie. You shiver, quickening your pace. Turning a corner, you nearly collide with a pair of men oaked in shadow. One carries a torch, the other grips a club. They glance at you, eyes narrowing, but the torchbearer snorts and waves you on. You exhale shakily, heart pounding in your throat. Historians still argue whether Rome had effective night watchmen or if protection mostly meant gangs controlling their turf. Judging by the smirks you just saw, you suspect the latter. Further along, you hear the clatter of dice. In the shadow of an archway, a group crouches on the stones, gambling by lamplight. Coins clink, curses hiss, and one man throws his arms up in triumph, scooping the pot with greedy hands. Another growls and lunges at him, fists flying. You don't wait to see the outcome. The last thing you need is to get dragged into a brawl over someone else's bad luck. You finally reach a wider street, hoping for safety, but instead you find a more organized chaos. Prostitutes linger by the lamplight, their voices honey-sweet, promising warmth against the night. They call out boldly, undeterred by passers-by. A man in a senator's toga disappears into the shadows with one of them, his status no shield from temptation. You glance away, cheeks burning, but you realize Rome doesn't blush at what you're seeing. It thrives on it. A stray cat darts across your path, chased by a pack of boys who shriek with laughter, throwing pebbles. You shake your head, muttering about cruel games. But then you hear a sharper sound. Footsteps behind you, too steady, too close. You glance back. A figure lurks in the gloom, keeping pace. Your grip on your basket tightens. The figure steps closer, until another group rounds the corner, rowdy and loud. Distracted, the shadow slips away. Relief washes through you, though unease lingers like smoke. Quirky tidbit: Roman citizens often hired slaves to escort them home after dark, carrying lanterns and acting as bodyguards. Without one, you're exposed, an easy mark for anyone bold enough. You mutter bitterly that your patronage coin barely bought you lunch, let alone a personal guard. As you pass under an arch, a man leans against the wall, eyes glassy from drink. He mutters curses at invisible enemies, waving an empty jug like a weapon. You edge past carefully, but he spits at your feet, laughing as you recoil. Rome at night doesn't care about dignity. It cares about dominance. Finally, you near the insula where you live. The building looms in shadow, crooked wooden balconies stacked precariously high. A lamp flickers in one window, casting a weak glow. You climb the steps quickly, the wood creaking beneath your sandals. At the landing, you glance back one last time. The street below lies half buried in shadow, alive with whispers and shuffles. The city doesn't sleep, it prowls. Inside your small room, the noise dulls, but it doesn't vanish. You hear drunken voices drifting through thin walls, dogs barking somewhere below, footsteps stomping across the floor above. You bolt the door, set your bread basket aside, and sink to the mattress, exhaling hard. The danger of Rome's nights gnaws at you, more exhausting than the heat of the day. You whisper into the dim, half to yourself, half to the gods you still don't trust. Let me last until morning. The door is bolted, the lamp flickers low, and for a moment you think you can finally rest. But Rome isn't done with you, not yet. You collapse onto your straw-stuffed mattress, the coarse ticking scratching your skin, and immediately feel tiny pinpricks along your arms and legs. Fleas, of course. You slap at them, grumbling, but they're relentless. The mattress itself smells faintly of mildew, as though it has soaked up centuries of sweat and damp. You shift, searching for a comfortable spot, but there isn't one. Comfort isn't part of the Roman rental agreement. Outside, the streets remain alive with noise. Voices drift through the thin walls, laughter, arguing, the clink of cups. A dog barks, then yelps, silenced by someone's boot. Above you, someone stomps across the wooden floor, shaking dust into your face. To your left, a couple argues so loudly you catch every word. Even in Latin, the tone is unmistakable. Privacy doesn't exist here. You share every breath, every sound, every cough with your neighbors. A sudden crash startles you, the unmistakable sound of pottery shattering. You freeze, waiting for silence, but instead hear curses and stomping feet. Maybe it's just clumsiness, maybe it's a fight. In an insula, the line between domestic accident and domestic chaos is razor thin. Historians still argue how often these crowded buildings collapsed under their own weight, but as you lie there, you can feel the timbers creak and sway. Every gust of wind feels like a warning. You tug your tunic tighter, curling against the wall. Heat radiates from the day's sun, trapped inside the bricks. The air is stifling, thick enough to choke, and your lamp only makes it worse. You snuff it out, plunging yourself into darkness. At least the dark hides the stains on the walls, but the dark brings other problems. Shapes move in your imagination, shadows crawling across the city. You hear scuttling, rats. Of course there are rats. Their claws scratch faintly against wood as they dart through cracks. You mutter a prayer to whichever god handles vermin, promising a crumb of bread tomorrow if they leave you alone tonight. Sleep teases you, but it won't commit. Your mind spins, replaying the day, the baths, the recruiters, the gladiators, the porridge with flies. Each memory buzzes like a mosquito in your head. You roll onto your back, staring at nothing, and wonder how Romans ever managed to rest in such a city. Then the dreams begin, not gentle dreams, but feverish ones. You drift into visions of the forum, voices shouting endlessly, masks leering from the theatre stage, gladiators' wooden swords slamming against your ribs. You jolt awake, drenched in sweat, heart hammering as though you truly fought in the sand. The fleas greet you again, eager for fresh skin. You groan. Somewhere in the building a baby cries, wailing without pause. The mother shushes, hums, then joins the wailing herself in sheer exhaustion. A few neighbors shout angrily through the walls, demanding silence. The baby doesn't care. The night stretches long, a patchwork of sobs, curses, and the occasional thud of furniture against wood. Quirky tidbit. Ancient Romans sometimes smeared wolf fat on doorframes to ward off nightmares. You don't have wolf fat, you have fleas and creaking beams. You wonder if nightmares are inevitable when your bed feels like it's biting back. You toss, you turn, you swat at insects. The straw pokes your skin, the heat presses down, the noise drills through your ears. Every sense is assaulted. Rest feels like a fantasy. You envy statues, cold, unmoving, unbitten. At some point, exhaustion drags you under. Dreams twist again. You see the Colosseum, lions leaping, the crowd roaring, and you realize you're the one in the arena. You stumble, weaponless, as sand clings to your sweat. You fall and the roar crescendos until you wake again, breathless, heart pounding. The dream was cruel, too real. You wipe your face, realizing it's slick with sweat and dust. The night creeps toward dawn. You drift in and out, each moment of sleep punctured by noise or itch or fear. Time stretches, bends, mocks you. Rome doesn't give you peace, even when your eyes are closed. When the first rooster crows, its cry cuts sharp through the haze of restless half-sleep. You groan, burying your face in the straw, wishing for silence. But there is no silence here. Morning is coming, whether you're ready or not. And you know what that means. Another day of porridge, patrons, recruiters, and survival. As your neighbors stir, their voices already rising, you clutch the last crumb of bread from your basket. It's stale, hard, barely edible. You chew anyway, jaw aching, and mutter bitterly, "Another day." You survived the night. Barely, but Rome waits outside, hungry to swallow you again. The rooster's cry fades into the rising rumble of the city, and you blink blearily at the first slant of dawn light creeping through your tiny window. The air inside your insular cell is thick, heavy with the smell of sweat, mildew, and last night's cooking fires that seeped through every crack. Your body aches from the straw mattress, your skin is dotted with flea bites, and your head feels as if it has been hammered on an anvil. Yet Rome does not wait for you to feel rested. The city demands you rise. You push yourself upright, rubbing grit from your eyes. The wooden beams above your head groan as someone upstairs stumbles across their floor. Dust sprinkles onto your hair, a little morning gift from the family above. Below you hear pots clattering, a baby shrieking, and a neighbor shouting for silence. Already the daily symphony begins. You sigh, pulling your tunic over your head, noticing once again the stains you couldn't wash away yesterday. Laundry will have to wait. Survival comes first. You step into the stairwell, its boards creaking, its air sour from too many families crammed together. A goat bleats somewhere below, tethered by a neighbor who thinks livestock and apartments are a perfect match. The stairwell itself leans unnervingly, and you grip the rail, praying the whole building doesn't collapse before you make it outside. Historians still argue how often these insulae fell, but living here, you don't doubt the danger. Finally, you push into the street and Rome greets you once more. The dawn light paints the cobblestones pink, but beauty lasts only a moment before noise drowns it out. Merchants are already shouting prices, carts rattle past with clattering wheels, and bakers bang open their ovens, smoke puffing like dragon's breath. The city is a beast that never truly sleeps, only dozes before roaring awake again. Your stomach growls again. You nibble on the last crumb of stale bread from your basket, its hardness nearly cracking your tooth. You dream of honey cakes, figs, anything sweet, but reality delivers another day of hunger. You wonder fleetingly if you should line up for the grain dole again, knowing the crowds, the dust, the jostling fists. The thought exhausts you before the line even begins. As you shuffle along, you spot a familiar face, the recruiter from yesterday, his scar catching the morning light. He scans the crowd like a hawk, eyes sharp, searching for easy prey. You duck your head, slipping behind a group of women carrying baskets. You pray silently to Mercury to keep you invisible. For now, you succeed. But you know it's temporary. In Rome, every citizen is fuel for the machine, sooner or later. Further along you pass the forum again, already buzzing. Politicians climb steps, their voices booming about justice, corruption, and the greatness of Rome. The crowd listens with half an ear, more interested in gossip and the promise of free games. You catch snippets. A new law debated, a scandal whispered, a rumor about the emperor's health. It's the same chaos as yesterday, the same voices shouting, the same endless theatre. Nothing changes, except the faces who get trampled beneath it. You dodge through the crowd, avoiding a pickpocket's hand, and make your way toward the baths. Maybe you think another scrape down with a strigil, another plunge into cold water will chase away the fatigue. But the baths are already crowded, steam pouring into the street, voices echoing in gossip. You hesitate. Yesterday's sweat and stink are still clinging to your skin, but the thought of more gossip, more strangers pressed against you, makes you step back, maybe later. The sun climbs higher, the heat thickening again, and you realize with sinking dread the cycle has already begun anew. Another day of noise, hunger, dodging dangers, pretending loyalty to patrons, avoiding recruiters, stepping around filth, praying at shrines and watching your back in the dark. Rome doesn't let you escape. It doesn't pause. It doesn't care if you slept badly, if you're hungry, if you're tired. It only marches on, demanding you keep pace or be crushed underfoot. You look down at your flea-bitten arms, your frayed tunic, your empty basket, and you laugh softly, dry, bitter but genuine. The truth hits you like a hammer. You wouldn't last a day in the Roman Empire, and yet somehow you already have. The city begins again outside your window, but here, in the gentle hush of this narration, the pace slows. Let the sounds of the carts fade into the distance, the shouts of merchants soften into whispers, and the heat of the sun dim to a warm glow behind your eyelids. You don't need to walk those crowded streets any longer, not tonight. Breathe in slowly, letting the air feel cool and steady. Imagine the clamor of the forum dissolving into a low hum, the smell of garum and dust replaced with the faint sweetness of figs on a summer breeze. Picture the heavy stones of the insula melting into soft clouds, a roof that never creaks, walls that never spill dust onto your face. In this gentler Rome, there are no recruiters at the corner, no guards with whips, no fleas in your bedding, only the quiet rustle of night. You've trudged through the baths, the markets, the games, the dangers of dark alleys. You've faced hunger, heat, punishment, and sleeplessness. You carried the basket, dodged the chamber pots, and even endured a mouthful of dormouse and porridge. Now it's time to set it all down. You don't need to carry Rome's weight anymore. Feel your breath grow heavier, slower, the kind of rhythm that carries you into rest. Your limbs sink deeper, softer, as if the straw mattress has become a feather bed. The flicker of oil lamps turns into stars above, steady and distant, promising calm. Let the cycle of Rome fade away, and let your body sink into its own rhythm, gentle and steady. Here there is only quiet, here there is only rest. Sleep now, and dream not of Rome, but of peace.